Hello everyone, this is ACHAIA Akaya, and I am here with 13 once again. We are on game number 2 of the matchup between Azreal and KillerPlague. And once again, this is the tournament matchup, the last game of the tournament between Vile Gaming and SC2 Armory, and both of these players have absolutely just blown through this field. Azreal, unfortunately, actually only had to play one person, so he's been sitting on the bench for a little bit. But KillerPlague, on the other hand, has taken down absolutely every SC2 Armory player up until Azreal. Azreal, once again, the last obstacle in KillerPlague's way of taking down this tournament for his gaming site. So, but we are playing on Blistering Sands, which is once again a 2-player map. So, 13, what do you expect to see from the Protoss player on this map?
Well, we've seen KillerPlague get that early robotics facility pretty much every game that he's played in this tournament. You know, last time he had those very, very early Colossus, but it turned out to be the wrong tech, you know, because we saw Azreal go so heavy on tanks, and siege tanks take out Colossus pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are basically 2 major mistakes, maybe 3, that KillerPlague made last game that really cost him the game. The first one is, like you said, he had the Colossi tech, and when he saw that Azreal was so heavy on siege tanks, he did not switch to Immortals, which was a big mistake because, like you said, Immortals are a great counter for siege tanks. But then I think the other mistake that he made was that he did not attack that expansion that Azreal got up really early, and he did not he did not build an expansion of his own. So he basically let Azreal have a free expansion for quite a long time before he even attempted an attack. And usually when somebody expands that much quicker than you, you either want to A, respond with your own expansion as quickly as possible, or B, you want to attack them and make them pay for getting that expansion, because if they've got their resources invested in that expansion, obviously they're not going to have as much money invested on their army. The problem with what KillerPlague did is if you let that expansion sit for too long, eventually that slight discrepancy that you see of them having more money invested in their expansion than in their army evens out, because then once they have the expansion up and running, they start investing money in their army again. So anyways, that's like StarCraft noob 101 tactics right there. But I'm aware that everybody that watches this game is not necessarily diehard StarCraft fans. I've been playing StarCraft 1 since it was released in 1998, so I am by no means a professional, but I've been around the game for a long time. But I know that there are people that are just now getting into it. But it looks like KillerPlague, once again, going for a very, very similar build, going Gateway, getting his Cyber Core going right away after that, and then it looks like he's got his second Gateway. I would imagine that we're going to see the robotics facility as soon as the Cyber Core is done.
Yeah, he seems to be pretty stubborn with that strategy, but hey, he's made it pretty far in this tournament. It must be working for him. But like you said, we did see last game, we saw KillerPlague scout out Azreal very well. He had that early observer in his base before Azreal had any detection, but he still didn't switch his tech. I'm just really confused why he didn't do that.
Yeah, that's very curious to me too, because obviously he is a good player with how well he's done in this exhibition matchup. So it just seems like a bit of an oversight for him to make 2 mistakes like that in that game last game. It could be just possibly that he's getting worn out because, as I mentioned, he's taken out everybody on the SC2 Armory team. So perhaps he's just getting a little battle weary since he played so many games. And I know it's just playing a computer game, tapping on a keyboard, clicking a mouse. But when you're playing at the high level of play in these very competitive games, when you play that many games back to back, it can really wear on you.
Yeah, pull up their APMs real quick. I want to see how quick these guys play.
Yeah, I'm curious to see that too. I haven't looked at that a whole lot. It looks like Azreal actually has decent APM. He's got a little bit higher average, but both players staying right around the 80 to 100 mark most of the time, it looks like, although KillerPlague's making me a liar right now, going down to about 30. But anyways, yeah, I know a couple people have mentioned they like to see the APM. Unfortunately, I've seen some threads that indicate the APM counters in StarCraft 2 are apparently not very accurate at all, because they are they're too jumpy, and they're based on the time counter in the game. Let me see if I can explain this correctly, because the time in the game is actually, if you've ever noticed in the replays, the time in the game will go faster or slower based on what speed you're watching the replay at. So it's basically the same thing with the APMs, is it doesn't adjust. So if you're playing a game at faster or fast, it doesn't adjust the APM according to the time you're watching the game in. So it always just shows you APM based on the normal game speed, which of course messes it up a little bit when you're watching a game in faster. So anyways, I hope that wasn't too confusing. It's kind of a weird subject to talk about, but I've heard a lot of people complaining about that because they want their accurate APM counters. But anyways, it looks like KillerPlague is actually going to try to take down the destructible rocks in the back of Azreal's base, and meanwhile he has actually put up a Nexus of his own. 13, this is actually a tactic I've seen you a couple times When you take down these destructible rocks in the back, that gives you an extra entrance to your opponent's base, obviously. Typically, what do you like to do when you open up this back entrance? Do you run any diversion tactics, or what's your game plan at that point?
I typically only will do it if they don't have, some sort of building or overlord or something over there to detect it. It's been most effective for me when I can sneak units in, maybe like a DT or something like that in the back of their base. I really hate this map. I think I lose probably at least 2 out of 3 times whenever I play this map. So I don't know that I'm really the best person to ask that question about.
Fair enough. It does look like Azreal is expanding, and he is not yet aware of the expansion by KillerPlague. And KillerPlague's Nexus is actually already done, so he's got a little bit of a head start on
Needs to get some probes transferred down there, though.
Yeah, absolutely. That expansion does you absolutely no good if you have nobody mining at it. But it looks like these armies might be meeting up in the middle of the map here very shortly. It looks like Azreal, once again, actually has a slightly larger army than KillerPlague. Of course, KillerPlague went for the expansion a little bit earlier, so it looks like the situations are slightly flip-flopped, although with Azreal responding with his own expansion relatively quickly, I don't think that he's going to fall very far behind.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, KillerPlague doesn't have that expansion up and going, so I think that's about evens out the economy here. Well, now he does.
It looks like he did just transfer some probes to it, so he's got a decent. You can see he is taking a little bit of a lead on the income right now, but fortunately for Azreal, he does have the mules at his disposal for the Terran. With those returning 30 minerals per trip, that actually gives you a huge advantage on the income, especially off of one base. And as you can see right now, he's only about 100 to 200 behind, although it looks like it's starting to steepen a little bit more because the mule just died. But with this expansion just now coming up and running, he's going to be able to even that out very quickly. So Azreal not really suffering much in the economic game. One thing I did want to point out too is it looks like Azreal differentiating from some of the builds that I've seen him do in the past. Typically, as a Terran player, he's told me personally he actually likes to go barracks, factory, starport. That way he has one of each tech building and can get a nice unit mixture. And then once he finds out exactly what his opponent is starting to go for, he can get hard counters, and he already has the tech to pretty much get whatever he wants. So it looks like right now he's sticking with the same unit mixture that he had initially with just the Marines and the tanks. We may see him add in some Marauders here a little bit further down the line, but as of right now, there are Immortals on the map for KillerPlague, so it looks like he did learn his lesson from last game. He's got more Immortals building right now, and it's actually not even going for a robotics bay, which is very unusual for him. I'm sorry, he just made me a liar again. He just started building it. But he does have the Twilight Council up, which I have never seen him in this tournament build a Twilight Council, so that is very unusual for him.
Yeah, he hasn't yet researched any of the things that you use the Twilight Council for. So is he going to go for a Dark Shrine or a Templar Archives or something like that?
We'll have to see. He does not yet have any of those buildings currently warping in, despite the fact that he does have his Twilight Council finished, and he is not researching the Zealot charge ability or Blink. So as of right now, it's just kind of a building for the sake of having a building, I guess.
You can see how effective those Immortals are against tank. They have the Hardened Shield, plus they get the bonus damage against armored units.
Yeah, absolutely. And despite the fact that Immortal was on the front lines and just got rained down on, he still has all of his health and didn't even lose quite all of his shields. So that is definitely something that's worth having if you're facing off against the Terran army with a lot of tanks in it.
Yeah, definitely. He needs to target those tanks down with those Immortals.
Luckily, Azreal managing to focus fire down that first Immortal, although it looks like he kind of dropped the ball a little bit on that second Immortal, and Siege Tank's not sieging up. He did manage to take out a few more units as they were running away, but pretty much all of his Marines are gone at this point, so he did suffer some pretty serious losses on that one, and it looks like still trying to get up the back ramp here. KillerPlague managing to warp in a couple of units to defend that. He does have a pylon over there, so he can warp in units right on that ramp.
Yeah, definitely. With KillerPlague killing the majority of Azreal's, biological units, he needs to get some more Zealots in here to take out his tanks.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially if he can research that charge ability. As we mentioned, he does have the Twilight Council, so I'm not sure why he's not researching that yet.
Pulling the probes off.
Yeah, it looks like he is switching to Colossi tech once again here, which, as you mentioned, I think is a mistake because he's facing off against such a tank-heavy army. And Azreal actually is pushing pretty far. He took a lot of those probes. Actually, it looks like all the probes from the expansion here. So as of right now, there's probably going to be a